the Discord that was like, what maps are there that you know are bad, but you enjoy playing on them anyways? And I guess Whatville would be your answer. I think Dust Bowl is like the typical answer because I think a lot of people like hate the way that map actually is, but it's really really fun because you don't have to take it too seriously. You don't have to take it.
I
It's
think
Dust Bowl.
Dust Bowl offers a unique experience in TF2
Mm.
simply by having that older FPS design
Mm-hmm.
where I will say there's like nothing more satisfying in TF2 than trying to push for 20 minutes on Dust Bowl last on third stage and then finally breaking through with like a minute left.
Yeah, like the ultimate
It's like
pub
it's
push.
like the fucking apotheosis of the TF2 experience
Mm.
where like after a 20-minute war you finally break through. And it rarely happens, but when it does, it's like the chef's kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And it's arguable that it's good design to create that rare high moment gameplay experience, as they say, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But
Are
yeah, in general, I guess I'll borrow a phrase from Axis, who we were talking about earlier. It's like a ball crushing simulator.
yeah, that's a good way of putting it. That's very yeah.
Oh
That,
my
very
god.
apt.
Oh, the demo man has crits again.
Yeah.
Oh, 50 kill streak? Why not add a few more?
Yeah.
But sometimes you get the nice balanced game and it is an experience unparalleled. So there's definitely something special to Dust Bowl that I don't think you really get out of the modern maps.
Hmm. Yeah, are you do you like random crits? I'm curious now.
Um I'm kind of ambivalent. Like I wouldn't be upset if they got rid of them,
Hmm.
but I do think it's extremely funny to
Yeah.
just launch a crit rocket across the map and kill 3 people.
Yeah.
Totally unfair and stupid, I agree. But I don't know. Sometimes you just gotta have those wacky moments in the game, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really spices up the experience, makes
Mm-hmm.
TF2 unique
Yeah.
in that regard.
Yeah, we talk a lot on this show about or at least lately because we've been talking a lot about Meet Your Match. It's kind of been on the brain. But how TF2 like circa 2015 2016 started transitioning into this more quote unquote competitive direction when it wasn't really designed that way foundationally. And random crits is like the quintessential example where most of the people who I think like passionately hate random crits see TF2 in a more competitive light, whereas people who like them kind of treat the game as an almost exclusively casual experience.
Yeah, Meet Your Match. That was
It was
a
great.
dark day, you know?
Dark chapter.
Dark day, darkest day,
Mm.
arguably in the history of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a relatively new player, infamously a relatively new player. I started playing in 2019, so I've heard horror stories of the Meet Your Match launch. Uh,
Dude, it was bad. I have a distinct memory, and one day I want to make a Downward Diary video about this as it pertains to the larger conversation about competitive gaming.
mm,
But I used to play like TF2 with my friends from high school almost every day,
mm-hmm.
and then as soon as Meet Your Match came out, it was over. None of my friends played TF2 anymore after
Yep.
that,
Yeah.
and it sucked. I had to basically learn to play the game by myself again, which I hadn't done since I first started playing, and eventually I got back into it
Mm-hmm.
because the inherent underlying game design is just so good and fun. But that was like a watershed moment in terms of like, and no one even knew it at the time, but the game would never be the same after that.
Mm-hmm.
And like basically all my friends stopped playing.
Mm.
Well, I don't know if you remember, but for a while it was basically impossible to actually get into a game with your
Yes,
friends on
well,
official
precisely.
servers.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh great, let's queue up for a game.
Mm-hmm.
It takes 20 minutes to get in a game, and then the teams are completely imbalanced, and it's over in like 5 minutes.
And then the server resets.
Yeah.
And no
You
one,
don't keep going.
Mm-hmm.
no one asked for it. They just added it in. I had like I had like one of the competitive beta passes back then,
Mm.
and it was like, oh cool, we're beta testing competitive mode. First of all, everyone gave feedback. They listened to none of it. The fucking release date of Meet Your Match competitive mode was exactly the same as the beta with no changes. And then uprooting casual and getting rid of quick play, that wasn't even mentioned. And they had that whole blog post before where they're like, oh, we're making all these balance changes, blah, blah, blah.
Mm.
And, oh, by the way, we're not going to mention this, but the entire method of queuing to servers, like one of the most fundamental parts of actually engaging with the game, we're going to completely overhaul that with no beta testing, no feedback, no news whatsoever until, boom, it's in the game and it's like this forever and we're not going back.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my god, what were they thinking? That's just complete insanity when it comes to just community relations and basic game developing strategy. I don't know.
Mm.
I have no idea what they were thinking, but they were all panicked about Overwatch, I guess, so we had to turn TF2 into Overwatch, and
Yeah.
it was disastrous to say the least.
Yeah, I know. I'm gonna say what Zesty would say if he were here. That like, apparently it was more Valve seeing the success of Counter Strike, and how well CS:GO was doing for them, and all that on top of Dota, they kind of wanted to have a three-pronged esports approach. And when Overwatch was announced, it was like a further kick in the pants in that direction. And once they made the mistake, they just never went back. That was just
Well, it seems awfully coincidental with the timing
yeah,
and
yeah.
how rushed it felt. Where I remember that May, that was like the fucking peak of Overwatch, where like everyone loved Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
I never even really got to play it back then.
Mm-hmm.
But, I didn't come out of the gates hating Overwatch. I know there's this huge rivalry between TF2 and Overwatch players,
Mm-hmm.
and I definitely felt it a little bit later on, especially after that horrible MatPat video. That was really like a huge divisive thing.
Mm-hmm.
But out of the gates, I didn't hate Overwatch. I didn't hate the idea of Overwatch coming in and being successful.
Mm-hmm.
But it was only after it seemed like TF2 made this reactionary move to try to emulate Overwatch and to try to modernize the game to appeal to Overwatch players who, again, it's a lot of like MOBA players and Blizzard fans who otherwise would have had like nothing to do with TF2 anyway. So, I don't know, that's extremely misguided part of the game's history, and it contributed to damages that we're still seeing today, and it's very unfortunate
Yeah.
they had to go down that road.
Yeah. I did a video where I interviewed members of the U.S. military about TF2, and the most and none of them were still playing today, and the most common reason that they had all given for quitting was Meet Your Match. It was like a nail in the coffin for so many people, and it's genuinely like a miracle that the game lived. I think it just lived because it is genuinely that good. I think it lives off the back of its quality, but Meet Your Match it would have killed like 95% of other games, I think.
Yeah, but in a way it changed the people who play the game as well, because a lot of the people we talked to there were more like the boomer shooter gamers,
True, that's also true.
Yeah. I mean, back when I still played the game a couple of years ago, there'd be many moments in game where I'd see someone on my team just completely clueless, free to play, and then my instinct would be to get mad, thinking like, "Oh, great, another useless teammate." But then I'd start to think to myself, "You know what? I'm happy to see it because that means the game is still getting good players somehow, or not good new players. Somehow, the game is still getting new players, and probably it's free to play game, so that helps." But I just figured like after a while, maybe like 2018, 19, 2020, the flow of new players would stop. But no, I'd get into like even a couple of years ago, and there'd be like brand new players in the game still. And at that point, it honestly surprised me, but it was still a good sight to see. Like in spite of the poor decision making in the treatment of the game, that new people are still coming in. and in some ways it's also frustrating because the new player experience has gone downhill so much,
Mm-hmm.
where it's hard to believe that many of them are being retained. But it's still good to see at least that TF2. I guess people talk about TF2 a lot, so
Yeah.
there's probably plenty of people coming to see what all the hype is about.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think on that note, we can talk more about like more specifically about the video you uploaded, which I'm excited to get into. But first, I know I'm sure like 95% of people in chat know you, but would you like to introduce yourself anyways?
Well, I am EmpLemon. I've been on YouTube for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
making videos for a long time. Still going pretty strong. I feel like an old person
Mm.
when it comes to YouTube now. Like definitely time has passed me by and a bunch of new people have come in, but I enjoy making videos. That's always been the reason. I never expected to get to the place where I was today,
Mm-hmm.
but all of it came out of just step by step wanting to make better and better videos and projects
Mm.
to entertain people, I guess. So, yeah, I've had a long history, but I guess eventually it's brought me to the UFR show. So, I guess
The
let's talk
ultimate
about the video.
destination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Truly truly the pinnacle of your career.
Yeah,
Um
this is
Yeah, no. But yeah, we're not gonna go through his video incrementally for those who are used to what we do on the show. We're not gonna do that because I am respecting Imp's time, and he only has an hour today. So I've narrowed the video down to 4 individual bullet points that I think kind of encapsulate the general, I don't know, the soul of the video, if you will. I wanted to ask to start off, Imp. What made you want to make this video? Like, what triggered you sitting down and writing this script?
So I've been a long time follower of the TF2 community,
Mm.
and even after I haven't been playing the game recently, I have been still like watching TF2 videos and keeping up with what's going on TF2 content wise. And so obviously I saw the Fix TF2 movement, and this was like coincidentally after the Deadlock leaks.
Mm-hmm.
I made a video on my second channel, Downward Diary. Basically, my raw reaction to saying like, this game is gonna suck ass. Okay, this
Yep.
is gonna be like a total albatross for Valve,
Mm-hmm.
completely tone deaf for them to divert. And I understand it's not the official release, and like freaking Uncle Dane was ultimately responsible for leaking it.
Of all people.
So it's not like a Valve PR thing where they messed up, but the fact that the game existed in the first place, and like, there's this sentiment where for a lot of the TF2 players, and not even just TF2, Counter-Strike players
Mm-hmm.
and Left 4 Dead players, of which even for something like Left 4 Dead, there is a small dedicated community, not too dissimilar to TF2.
Mm.
This was like a straw that broke the camel's back moment,
Mhm.
where people were willing to tolerate the neglect from Valve, like as long as there was this idea. It's like, okay, maybe they've moved on from making games, they're just managing Steam, they're managing the Steam Deck, whatever. It's still not good that they're neglecting their properties, but at least they have some kind of excuse in that department.
Mm-hmm.
But when Deadlock got leaked, this was like a bunch of I feel like a bunch of the legacy Valve gamers got together and sort of said, "No, no, 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 no. You don't get to do this
Mm-hmm.
and have your existing titles, which still have strong, loyal player bases, basically rotting away."
Yeah.
So the Deadlock thing feels like was a big spur of the moment, and I released my video, and coincidentally, the Fix TF2 movement started right about then.
Yeah.
I don't know and I don't know the specific origins or how long they were planning it, but it seemed like Deadlock was kind of this inciting incident
Yeah.
where a lot of people were fed up, and there's like, okay, it's time to make a stink.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, I was looking at the Fix TF2 discourse on social media. And when it came out, there was, I mean, as to be expected, a lot of backlash. People don't like loud movements online.
Mm-hmm.
They think it's annoying. They don't like seeing the clutter on their timeline when it's something they don't understand. And basically, what I started to see was this canned response of people saying, "Oh, well, TF2 is just a lost cause. It's old. You should just leave and abandon. Why bother complaining?"
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like over and over again, I'd see this as like the default response to people who are like, okay, maybe we should like actually care about and inspire Valve, let's just say that, to have some positive change in what many people acknowledge is one of the best designed games in history,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe not to just let it get thrown in the dumpster.
Mm-hmm.
And the response for so many people is like, "Oh no, just leave,
Yeah.
just go play something else. It's so obvious, guys. Why don't you just go play something else?" And honestly, what tipped me over the scale, there was like a comment I got on my Deadlock video
Mm.
of someone saying, Deadlock is basically TF3, so you should stop complaining and go play that. And that to me is like, okay, this is a problem that's like beyond trolling and contrarianism. This is like a mass scale brain rot issue
Mm.
where it's like a gaming consumer issue where modern gaming consumers have been socially engineered into this cycle of just discarding perfectly good products in favor of new ones, which are just by design worse for the consumer,
Mm-hmm.
more anti-consumer, more like less fun, actual inherently fun game design elements, and more predatory monetization schemes. And that to me is what, I mean, the writing's on the wall with Deadlock, folks.
Mm-hmm.
My video was like, my video was like not too popular. It got like 20% dislikes.
Mm.
Although you can't see it anymore, so I could just pretend that everyone liked the video.
Uh,
But yeah, there's a lot of people who don't like me criticizing these games.
mm.
Part of them have a point. I mean, it's not even out yet. It hasn't even been announced yet. But I mean, I've been around long enough where I can just see these things where it's like,
Mm.
let me guess, loot boxes. You think Deadlock is going to release without loot boxes?
Nope.
Fat chance, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Competitively prioritized mode with no real emphasis on the casual experience. Do you think that's going to be a thing in Deadlock?
Mm. Yeah, I
It's pretty likely.
yeah, I like I said, I played the game yesterday for the first time because I was given beta access, and I was very immediately like, oh, this isn't a Valve game, and that sounds kind of pedantic and a little bit was not superstitious. A little, it sounds kind of ridiculous to say like, oh, this isn't a Valve game when it's made by that company, but it doesn't have that same essence, that same originality or feel to it. It has a semblance of an aesthetic, but nothing really deeper or more deeper than surface level. And overlaid over it is all of these gameplay elements that are just ripped straight from MOBAs and other third-person shooters, and like Smite, for instance. Like it's just all of this stuff that's been like thrown into the game, and most of it does not seem to have any cohesion. It doesn't have any natural like through line where it's like, oh, this is how this connects to the next thing. It just seems like a decrepit version of a formula that's already been done to death several times over, which is kind of sad to come out of the company that is Valve. But that version of Valve that people have in their heads is like the golden age Valve. That's very, very gone. And Deadlock's existence is kind of an emblem of that, I think.
Yeah, and obviously I haven't played it. I have no intention of playing it, and you can call me a hypocrite for like shitting on a game without playing it, obviously. But look, if any no-name developer released Deadlock, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Oh yeah, of
But
course.
since this is supposed to be part of the Valve prestigious lineage of titles, that's where I step in and have my objections.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, from a lot of people I've heard, they don't like the game. I saw a Space Guys video talking about how the game is just inherently unfun, at
Mhm.
least according to his opinion. And I got a lot of comments on my Deadlock video from beta testers. Some of them liked the game, but they seem to be more like MOBA fans.
Mhm.
Whereas the actual shooter fans, which again, if you're putting guns in the game and adding shooting, I'd expect you to be at least trying to appeal to them somewhat.
Mhm.
First person shooter fans, and they seem to hate the game.
Mhm.
So, I mean, like, as someone who like doesn't like Dota or League of Legends, what the hell is the appeal of this game if the shooting is like a nonsensical accessory?
Mhm.
But I guess to go further to the point, my focus instead shifted on this follow-up video of like, I don't know, should TF2 players just move on, as everyone says, and really me trying to pick apart just how first of all, it's like a non-argument.
Mhm.
It's an unserious argument. Like anyone who has any actual skin in the game would realize that it's completely pointless to tell TF2 players to just go play something else.
Mhm.
Obviously, if they're still playing, even in the battered, bot-infested state, and all they do want is for the game to go back to being playable, which again is not too difficult of a request, as emphasized by what happened. But even before that, even before the bot removal, I really think it was not asking hardly anything for
Mhm.
the game to be functional. And yet you had this like alternative opinion largely in the gaming space by people who, let's be honest here, don't seem to care about good design in games.
Yeah. Agreed.
People who care about games being hype and games being on the biggest streamers, Twitch stream.
Mhm.
These types of people who have like no taste when it comes to actual good games. And you can call me arrogant for saying this,
Mhm.
but the fact of the matter is that I am a fan of good design and good taste.
Mhm.
I try to fill my life with things and art that are valuable, inherently valuable,
Mhm.
not just something that's like taking a shot of heroin where you're having a bad day and then all of a sudden you have to feel better. So you turn on the bright and flashy lights and dopamine injecting things that aren't actually good design.
Mhm.
They're not actually anything fun or rewarding, but they flip all the switches in your brain to fool you into thinking that it is.
Mhm.
And that's what a lot of modern gaming has become, addicting the consumer
Mhm.
and then forcing them on a treadmill, and this will come up later, where your sense of enjoyment in a game comes out of habit and repetition and not out of any actual developing skills or exploring fun mechanics or fun physics or dynamic strategy and other gameplay interactions like that. No, it comes out of flashing lights, no different from a slot machine, and
Mhm.
really no different from doing crack cocaine.
Yeah.
So I'm here addressing sort of this type of gamer, these people who really haven't even dipped their toes on what it means for a game to actually be inherently good.
Mhm.
And this, I feel like, is a lot of the backlash. They look at fixed TF2 and they're like, the game's done. It's over. It's 17 years old. Why are you still playing? You're the idiot for still keeping with a 17-year-old game. And it's like,
Mhm.
it's almost like TF2, because obviously TF2 players, they understand.
Mhm.
And this video is made more so for the people who they're like so brain rotted as a consumer,
Mhm.
where they can't comprehend that people would stick with a game for its inherent charm and amazing design elements. And it's like, why don't you just move on? You know, your
Yeah.
car is 5 years old. It's like these are the type of people who would like prefer to
Mhm.
like lease a new Mercedes
Mm.
rather than buying a car that's dependable and useful. It's all about flashy appearances, and TF2 has never been flashy.
Mm.
And I think that's why so many people are attracted to the game because it's understated. The art style is understated.
Yeah. And
It's beautiful to look at, but it doesn't like throw a bunch of anime boobs in your face or a bunch of like shiny explosive particle effects.
Mm-hmm.
It's understated, and it has a language of subtlety that I think has been lost by a lot of modern consumers who know nothing else than a world of just bright flashing lights and microtransactions and loot boxes.
Mm.
Yeah, and bright flashing lights are easily interchanged for each other, whereas there is not another TF2.
Yeah, there's nowhere else to go. If you
But
want to
if all
play,
you know is the flashing lights, then it's hard to understand that there isn't another option.
mm-hmm. and also I think this is kind of this whole thing, and you can decide whether or not you really want to get into this, but this whole thing is like a microcosm of a greater problem, which is that a lot of people don't believe that there is such a thing as good art in general, like across the board. They don't see they aren't distinguishing between the amount of craftsmanship and work that went into making something like Team Fortress 2 versus Deadlock, or insert other live service title here that will die out in X amount of years. They don't see that, they don't distinguish that there is a difference between those two things, and that there's like a level of craftsmanship or a level of effort. They just want the next thing, and then they move on, and they get the next thing, and they move on.
Yeah. To me, it indicates a lack of depth and understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fine if you're just a simple person who enjoys simple things, but don't stick your neck out and yap your mouth about how somehow TF2 players are wrong for wanting to salvage this game that has been damaged by not the developers, at least not directly, but by outside forces that are just blatantly exploiting the game
Mm-hmm.
due to mostly negligence of the developer. But the core game in there, while intact, is still probably the best first-person shooter experience ever made, and that's in my opinion. But a lot of people would agree with that. There's a reason why people get sucked into TF2, and it doesn't have to do with superficial things like hats or memes. TF2 is just one of those games that it's going to be looked at 100 years from now as a pinnacle of engineering.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Like in the same way people look at Citizen Kane in film today. And you can choose to ignore that, and you don't even have to have the pomp and circumstance where it's like, wow, I'm playing a well-designed game. You can just enjoy it. But to include yourself in these conversations and run your mouth about how, oh, TF2 players are wrong, when it's clear that you lack the depth of understanding in what is even basically good in game design.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are just in over their head, and they need to shut their mouth and listen more.
And there's also a degree of, like, I don't know, not. I hesitate to say narcissism, but there's a degree of pompous in the statement of, oh, just leave TF2, because there's an implication that, like, oh, I as a person telling you to leave this, if I were in your position, I'd be able to just, I have no emotional connection to this, and you shouldn't either. And it's bad that you have emotional connection to this piece of art. It's like a lot of it'd be like if there was a terrorist group that was threatening to destroy the Mona Lisa, and in response someone says, well, why should we care? I don't really like the Mona Lisa, and it's really old, so like, who
and
really...
you can't really expect the French government to go through the treadmill work of hiring security guards, can you?
Yeah, no, that...
Yeah. I mean, I could just print out a picture of the Mona Lisa. It would be just as good.
Yeah.
Or I could commission an artist to draw a Mona Lisa, but in a modern style. Give her a anime face with big titties, and then it would be just as good. No, it would be better, because these modern things, they're always good. And just adding them to just classically revered things, that's just a win-win, right? You always have to push forward into the future and progress, regardless of what lies ahead, or anything regarding what design aspects are actually helpful and beneficial to the player.
And there's no reverence for history either that's taken into consideration. I really like, because this is something I also said on the show multiple times during the fixed TF2 stuff, when you said TF2's fate is what will happen to all of these other games, that is absolutely correct, and it is almost never brought up by people who are making the point that TF2 should die or are defending it, which is like TF2 is the model for what will happen. Whatever happens to TF2 now, that is what will happen to every other game that follows it. That is also a live service game. Yeah, and it's genuinely it will be sad if TF2 dies because of it. It'll basically be a martyr for
Oh yeah, we'll talk about a horrible precedent for the rest of the gaming industry.
Yeah.
Where like how many of TF2's player base has spent hundreds of dollars in microtransactions, and now that's all just dead cap after that point. And what message is that going to show to the Dota and CS:GO economies? And you notice a lot of new games, they don't really lean into the economy that much because that would make it easier for developers to pull the plug and justify the situation. As is what happened with Overwatch 1, whose discontinuation as of like this month has now become completely pointless.
Yeah, it's genuinely because me and Alan also play a bit of Overwatch, and when Overwatch 1 got killed in favor of Overwatch 2, it was kind of a moment for me where I was like, well, what's the point? You could have just if you're not going to change the game like basically at all, you could have just updated the old game, but you know, oh, we get to have the big 2 on the title. You know, we get to have the 2 on the title. We get to market it as a sequel, even though it's not really.
It's more about you don't want to cannibalize. It's a business argument, you know. You don't want to cannibalize your own market share.
Yeah. And look,
you would be having your own competition at that point.
Yeah. Everyone can laugh at Blizzard. Haha, what a bunch of idiots. Valve did the same thing with Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
And we must not allow that to be forgotten. CS:GO was a perfectly functioning product, and they scrapped it for seemingly no other reason than to put people into this new engine with wait for it, new monetization practices. What about that? You can rent your skins now and feel like a big boy. Same people who lease a Mercedes. I guess we're just trying to get into that that type of brain rot for gamers now. Yeah. But it's concerning to see that this is becoming an accepted trend in the video game industry. And I don't know. I was talking about my general thesis for the video, but I don't know if there were specific points you wanted to bring up, or if we're going to get to this point later about how gamers have been conditioned into just throwing out what's old into the trash, regardless of whether it's a still perfectly functional product, and just going new. I need the new thing, and it's a concerning change in habit in what seemingly the gaming consumers are responding to.
Yeah, no, I was gonna bring this up later, but yeah, there is it is profitable for companies if you do not have an emotional or any real attachment to the game that you're playing. It is profitable for companies if you have as little emotional investment as possible, so that they are allowed to change things repeatedly and make you pay for it again. And it's absolutely it is something that is more and more people are being conditioned with every new live service title that comes out, and the TF2 is kind of the only one that it's kind of that way with, you know, the crates 3 times a year, but it's not nearly as predatory as a lot of modern games have taken it. TF2 is kind of the last, because you mentioned that it's the first live service game and kind of the last boomer shooter.
Since it was the first, basically, and I understand there's like horse armor and gotcha stuff like that existed before, but in terms of integrating these into like a whole different, like an existing game framework, TF2 was the first.
Yes.
And since it was the first, they couldn't go balls to the wall with like all the most anti-consumer practices, because people would just rejected it and would have killed the game. So it had to be a bit of a foot in the door effect, where gradually they turned up the degeneracy in terms of corporate capitalist practices. And now, that's 10 years later, the game's coming out now. Now you have to pay for the battle pass and the skins, and there's also loot boxes and whatever the hell you want to put inside the gamer to make it more like the Vegas casino. it's they amped it up, but TF2 they had to use restraint because it was a new system, and people would have outright rejected it, and it wouldn't have been able, possibly, to have been as accepted as a prevailing business model that we see in the industry today.
Yeah, and there's like a lack of a desire. We were talking about DRG before the the stream started, but like DRG is the only game that I know of that has done a battle pass or something similar to it in a way that I feel is not predatory at all.
Oh yeah.
And the reason why it's the only example that I can think of off the top of my head is because there is no incentivization for companies to do that. There is absolutely no incentive for companies to do that at all. So the only reason Ghost Ship Games does it for DRG is because I assume, because it's the only reason I can come up with, they feel it's the right thing to do. It endears them to the heart of more hardcore gamers who grew up with things like TF2. It's kind of the reason why TF2 and DRG, one of the reasons why they have such a large crossover.
Oh yeah, there's a huge crossover.
Yeah, there's massive
huge
crossover.
crossover.
Yeah, and it's because they have very similar design philosophies in a lot of ways, and like the monetization stuff is one of them.
Think about all the games that have tried to get that crossover. Oh, we're the TF2 killer. We're gonna get all the TF2 players. It hasn't happened. Not even Overwatch. And it's like, why is that? Why can't you just put a bunch of classes with a bunch of guns, semi-fun, shooty, blasty mechanics, and why doesn't the TF2 player base migrate? It's because you're missing like half the equation. It's good to have these mechanics, but TF2 is so much more than that. It's about the visual design. It's about the visual clarity. It feels good. And I think this was like on the casual TF2 video you guys reviewed a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
It feels good to hang out on TF2 maps. And in like Deep Rock, it feels good to hang out in the space rig and like turn on the jukebox and drink beer with other dwarves.
Yeah.
Like that is what's missing from stuff like Overwatch, and it's a consequence of shifting away from the casual experience in favor of competitive MMR gaming. And yeah, Deep Rock has these fun casual elements, and it has the charm. And it has developers who the player base, they know that they care. And they know that they're not a bunch of rat bastards who are trying to increase the profits of a publicly traded company. And it makes a difference. People act like this doesn't make a difference, and a lot of developers have shied away from it's like, well, why bother putting in charm? Just get the credit card payments in order, the payment processor in order, add a couple guns, add a couple waifus and boobs, and then the people will come in. And it works on a lot of gamers, but the TF2 contingent and the people who value TF2, they're a little bit more sophisticated than that. And they need some type of juice in their game more than just, oh my god, you can shoot people with guns as a woman. I can't believe it. And yeah, Deep Rock, it has a lot of those elements. So that has been the TF2 crossover game, not the TF2 killer, but the game. I've never seen another game that has made so many TF2 players go like, oh yeah, that's a good game. I like it. I'll take time away from TF2 and play that game.
Yeah, DRG is the game that I play when I want TF2 but don't want to play TF2, or want like the same feeling, the same experience as TF2 but don't want to play it. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's true. Also, there's like this level of I don't know, thematic consistency when you're going from TF2 to DRG, because the games have such a natural, the tone isn't the same between both of them, but their sense of humor and the way each game carries itself, so to speak, is very similar. They respect the player's intelligence while also not being like super serious Call of Duty, we are the military.
Yeah.
You know?
You don't boot up the game and there isn't like a little personal assistant that says, okay guys, today we're going to Deep Rock Galactic. They're an evil corporation and you have to mine for them. Which I feel like, and that applies to like my issues with writing in a lot of modern games.
True.
And it kind of applies to general media as well. Like a lot of TV and movies that have been coming out recently. They're like just blatantly poorly written, and they don't seem to understand that the audience can pick up on things on their own. And in fact, when you lay things out like that and the audience discovers things on their own, it makes the product that much more satisfying rather than just having some character come in and brute force explain why you should care.
Yeah,
that's kind of a minor point when it refers to the greater conversation about gameplay and game design.
Yeah, but it's one of those like small things that makes it really easy for someone who plays TF2 to go over to DRG. Also, there's like you were talking about characters, right, and classes. When you put I'm gonna make a video about this sometime soon, but there aren't games really that have classes in the way that TF2 has them. TF2's like classes, TF2 has such a great balance between making all of their classes very good as self-inserts for their players, but maintaining the fact that they have personality. Because you have games like Overwatch where characters have such a staunch personality, and there's very limited ways to customize them, and it's very surface level. There isn't much depth to the way they interact with each other.
Yeah.
And that means that a person might have a little bit of trouble imposing themselves onto that character that they play, if that character, their personality is too defined for themselves. And then you have other games like Call of Duty or Halo, for instance, where the character is a complete blank slate. So there's a different challenge there with the player. The player can't really self-insert themselves in there either, because they have to make it all up. Whereas like Team Fortress 2 has this perfect balance between characters that have personalities and characters that are very easily customizable for the player to sort of insert themselves into.
Your loadout is your loadout in TF2, but in Overwatch, that's not your Tracer skin. That's Tracer skin number 10.
Yeah. There's no personality or individuality there.
Well, it comes down to, even in terms of the general voice lines, the voice lines in TF2 are so interesting and memorable. And the Meet the Team videos are so interesting and memorable because they actually had good writing and thought put behind them. And this is what I tell like aspiring YouTubers, where like writing is the most important thing to get people coming back to your video. And the same thing applies to video games. And a lot of Overwatch characters are very one note and poorly written. They don't feel like they could exist on their own. Like the TF2 characters feel like they could exist in a TV show. And historians of the game will know that there was actually supposed to be a TF2 TV show, but the people at Valve were like, we don't really want to format it like a TV show. And then that failed. But yeah, Expiration Day is supposed to be the pilot for the TF2 TV show, which we could have had this whole time, but
would have been
again,
awesome.
More gripes with the complacency of Valve to not capitalize on one of their best IPs. But in general, the TF2 characters have a lot of flavor, and it's not in your face, just completely overt flavor. Like the engineer doesn't say like, yeah, I'm from Texas, Texas. You just got that from Texas, and he's more subtle in how he delivers these lines. He clearly has a southern flavor in what he says, but it's not overt. They put it in a way where like it leaves a little bit on the table.
Yeah.
Where more work could be done with these characters. And there's something to be said about how, even like going back to 2008, 2009, when I was first going on YouTube, Gmod videos featuring the TF2 mercs hanging out. It's like you can fill in the blank of their personality and envision them in scenarios that would be realistic, comedic scenarios, even dramatic and tragic scenarios, as you see in Emesis Blue.
Yeah,
you can. They're still template enough, because obviously there's not a real like TV show or like opportunity for them to fully expose their characterizations or like put them on any kind of arc. But the framework of the characters, like these are interesting people to watch, and it's interesting to have them interact and even like LARP and role play on like trade servers with the mercs. And the same can't be said about hardly any of these other games, which they have like really cool character designs. It's like, wow, oh my god, Winston, awesome. A freaking gorilla who's a scientist, that seems kind of awesome. But then when you get to the actual like how they're portrayed in the game, they're either like always good or they're always evil.
Mm-hmm.
The TF2 characters are checkered.
Yeah.
It's like they're like characters from Breaking Bad,
Mm-hmm.
where they have moral aspects and immoral aspects, and there's like no real sense or like priority that, oh my god, they have to be role models, they have to do the right thing,
Mm-hmm.
which again is something you see so much in like modern media with
Mm-hmm.
poor writing,
Yeah.
where characters can't be realistic and gritty and deal with like have like conflicted issues and baggage,
Mm-hmm.
which people like almost everyone has in real life.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's just a tangent, but writing matters. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. And and usually weirdly enough, like the characters that like people like the Overwatch community really gravitates towards a set amount of heroes, and those heroes are the ones that have like actual like something going on. Like Sigma has a very tortured and very layered backstory, and it's reflected in the way that he talks to people, and that's like he's like the one of the exceptions, and that's why the Overwatch community loves him more than a lot of the other characters.
But they went the extra mile, and like when you're playing Sigma, you can hear voices every once in a while because he's gone crazy.
Yeah, and that's
no one else hears them, only you.
Yeah, and that's like that's what, he's one of the only characters where they actually like seem to give a shit and like put some effort into the way that he's written, because I agree with you, there's very one note writing in a lot of these games, because the writing it's not what matters. You're supposed to play the game and level up your battle pass or your competitive medal, and that's really all the value the game is supposed to have, so who cares about writing, and that's kind of sad. Frankly,
I actually really like the cinematics, but they never expanded on them. It's always like, oh look, I'm the good guy and I'm doing this thing, and the animation's awesome, but there's no real story.
Yeah. To get back more to the video though, the one of the things I wanted to ask you about was like you made a very interesting distinction between game tourists and game residents, and we kind of we kind of touched on it earlier, but do you want to like expound upon that in any way?
Well, this is just something that I feel like it never really gets brought up, but it's a huge fundamental difference in how people engage with games. And when people start arguing, it's like, oh yeah, you should just leave. It's like you're not even in the same ballpark of reasoning, because TF2 players are super loyal and they enjoy TF2. Most TF2 players, I imagine, at least the concurrent day-to-day player base, they consider TF2 to be their favorite game of all time, the greatest game of all time. So, like, how stupid of a point is it to tell them to just leave? And that is just that is where this distinction has to be made. It's like, because in order to say something so tone deaf, you have to fundamentally be thinking that TF2 gamers are like you, and you referring to the mentality of a tourist. And I'm not trying to denigrate people who engage in games this way, but for the sake of argument, these are the type of people who are so tone deaf when it comes to this argument. And that's that, no, TF2 players, and the same argument can be made for like Roblox players, Minecraft players, they play one game every day. And it's just purely unreasonable and nonsensical to tell them, it's like, well, what if you maybe didn't do that? And maybe on like more of these addicted mobile games, you can make that argument, but in terms of something like TF2, the inherent value of the game is not based on creating addicts or slot machine. So people are just content with like coming home from work or whatever and blowing off steam by just like firing the rocket launcher in TF2 at a sentry.
Yeah.
And I mean, what else are you supposed to say to that?
Yeah.
It's like, conversation over. If that's how you engage with video games, if that is the value that video games bring to your life, I mean, how can you possibly tell someone, oh, just play something else? Especially when the complaints are not directed at game balance, for the most part.
Yeah.
But specifically for fixed TF2, which is where this argument began, like, the game is infested with bots that are just ruining the experience. and these aren't things that Valve added. They have nothing to do with balance.
Mm-hmm.
So, am I like not allowed to try to make the game better?
Mm-hmm.
This game that I've like been, and there would be like, this is like reflecting times in my life where I played TF2 like every day for a year
Mm-hmm.
and not get tired of it
Yeah.
because the underlying design is that good.
Mm.
And you're just gonna tell me, oh, just go somewhere else, just throw it away. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's like a doublespeak thing. You're
Yeah.
basically saying, throw it in the trash and buy the new toy.
Yeah.
Like, just, okay, if you're a tourist, that's how you're used to engaging with the products, but you and I, we're not the same.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get the same value.
Yeah.
Some people get value out of just seeing something new. New. We need the newest thing all the time. And if it works for them, good.
Mm-hmm.
Good. You can get your enjoyment by a very simple way.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't like new for the sake of new. And this is like a lot of TF2 people would probably agree. In fact, a lot of the newer stuff added to the game is not well liked right now.
Yeah.
And people wish they could go back to the older stuff. There's certain people who understand inherently that new does not always equal good. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, there's an argument to be made that most new stuff added to video games in the general industry have been bad. And they've been bad for the player and bad for the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So plunging head first into the next new thing, sorry, there's a lot of people who believe that would devalue your experience.
Yeah.
And if you don't inherently get value out of engaging with the new thing, then you're going to try to seek that out from elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And usually you're going to be trying to look for a more enriching experience that can be repeated and still be fun. And this is beyond just TF2 player. There's people who treat Left 4 Dead like this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a small dedicated Left 4 Dead speedrunning community.
Mm-hmm.
Speedrunners in general. They play one game and try to master it and
Yeah.
do it the best. Is like, should they move on? Oh, just move on?
Well, yeah, you wouldn't hear anyone say this to like someone who plays soccer, pick up soccer like every week. You wouldn't hear anyone tell them. They'd sound ridiculous, being like, "Hey, just give up on soccer." You know, like why do you've been playing that for years? Who cares? Why bother? Like there are people in the mountains in Japan who have been doing Japanese calligraphy their entire life, and they're like 90 years old. And you like imagine someone like some Zoomer walking up to them and just being like, "Oh, just quit." Like there are other things you can do, you know. It's like they know they don't want to. They this is what fulfills them.
It's like, do you not think TF2 players are like autonomous individuals and they can make their own decisions and they're choosing to stay in the game?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, just go do something else.
I think and your video didn't really touch on this, and I can understand why it's not really, I guess, relevant to like the conversation exactly, but I think a lot of there's an underlying reason that like me and Wheezy and Zesty have encountered a lot, especially during the fixed TF2 stuff. When it was like happening, there are a lot of people who want the game to die because they don't want people. It's like the ultimate gatekeep. It's like gatekeep horseshoe theory. They don't want new people playing the game, and they feel it is so. New people, they don't want new people playing the game so badly that they want the game to stop existing so that they can have that like hipster independence from everybody else. And this sounds insane when I say it this way, but I promise you there are people who responded to UFR, our coverage of fixed TF2 stuff, and we're saying like, no, I want the game to die so these YouTubers and these community figures and these new players, they don't get to have the game anymore, because I want the game to be to ride off into the sunset. I don't want it to exist anymore, so new players can stop existing in it. And that's also kind of a contention that I see a lot with the kill TF2 people, is that they don't like that new people are playing the game at all. This wouldn't apply to like tourists. These aren't tourists. These are usually TF2 players saying this, but they really, really want to gatekeep the game from people. It's very interesting to me.
Well, you got to have new people, or else the game is going to die with the current generation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, sometimes it's annoying for when a game gets old and people kind of lose the original spirit and they weren't around for the original things. But the fact of the matter is, at the core of the game, we're all playing the same game, and people can have their different interpretations and whatnot. But as long as you're not trying to actively change the game for the worse, and you're just simply there to experience it, I don't really see a problem with new players engaging with the product, new YouTubers making videos about the product. I mean, you can't really say that because at one point everyone was a new player, and unless you were there on day one of the game, which 99% of the current player base was not, you don't really have a leg to stand on when it says like, or when saying like, oh well, this new generation they just don't know. Well, I remember there's a lot of hate for the free to plays, and this was before I even played TF2. But I remember YouTube videos about it saying like, oh my god, these free to plays, they're completely clueless. They don't know the etiquette of the game, and eventually that all went away, and those free to plays became the old players.
Yeah.
Many of which are here now. Most people in TF2 are not playing before the free to play update. So, yeah, I don't know. That's just one of those things where it's like eventually, you be the new player and you get to be the old player.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of perspective.
Yeah, I think that like the tourist versus residents thing is interesting to me because I didn't see as many of the tourists, quote unquote, as you saw, because I'm like, because due to my job makes it where I'm kind of very integrated with the the TF2 scene, and the very there's like a wall around me that kind of just shows like what's happening in the TF2 community. So people outside of it kind of looking in doesn't really reach me that often. So all I was hearing when people would criticize fixed TF2 or people would make fun of that, I only saw that from TF2 players. So I got a lot of this sort of mentality that like, no, you shouldn't want the game to be fixed because it doesn't deserve to be fixed because the new generation doesn't deserve this masterpiece or something along those lines.
Well, that's bizarre to think about. I feel sad knowing that new generations of people, they don't engage with good art as much. I feel like they need to see what good art is so that they can have a frame of reference in actually being able to discriminate in what is good and what is less good. So I really think it would help if more younger people and newer, fresh people, they got a taste of what really good game design looks like. And this applies to movies and music as well. And it's hard to get into that mentality of trying to actually go through and judge and like rank things in your head of which was a better designed experience. And it's always going to come down to a level of subjectivity. But in general, there's all-time greats, and they're repeated over and over again by older generations for a reason, because certain things and certain touches of artists throughout history, regardless of the medium, they make very impactful and important and well-designed things. And I think they need to be at least preserved in the general consciousness of society. And that's not going to happen if just people up and stop playing it because something is seen as too old, or new people into something are seen as just unworthy of being able to inherit the greatness for some reason.
Yeah, I think that there is a for the people there's like an egoed for the people who consume good art. A lot of them don't want other people who don't get it to consume good art, and there's a small subset of those people who want to try and introduce good art to people who haven't really consumed it or don't go out of their way to consume it. And I think those people kind of have their heart in the right place. When it comes to stuff like TF2, as well as like movies and whatnot, I always look to go out of my way to recommend my favorite movies to people, because because I want them to experience the same feeling or the same sense of euphoria that I felt when I watched that. And I kind of have the same mentality with TF2. It's kind of hard I find, to introduce newer players or people who are used to games like Valorant or Fortnite. It's harder to introduce TF2 to them because their standard is different. It's kind of like what you said in your video and earlier, where you were saying Like if you've never had something really good and all you've consumed is something really bad, you could never want something really good, and when it's presented to you, you might not see the reason in accepting it.
Oh no, yeah. Well, this is this is my gripe against the Mario movie, which I think Purple Colonel brought up in the last episode.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, like, I fucking hate the Mario movie. It fucking sucks. It's a bad movie, and I'm tired of people pretending like it's good just because, oh, they showed Mario and Luigi. It's like, yeah, I get that. I mean, I'd expect the Mario movie to show Mario and Luigi. They had the Hammer Bro, too. Oh, yeah. Oh, the Tanuki tail. Oh, my God, yeah, the things from the games. No way. They put the things from the games in the movie. What is the actual value of the movie? Other than seeing Mario in 3D on the big screen? Like, is there any value to the story of the Mario movie? Does anyone, like, come out of it? And I don't want to hear the excuse that it's just for babies, because I know for a fact a bunch of adults watched it, and I freaking watched it at, like, Creator Clash last year with a bunch of other YouTubers, and everyone was like, yeah, I liked it. It was like, sorry, it sucked. There's no other way to put it. It's like a lazy product lacking imagination. And they could have done so much more with Mario. They could have actually put in an interesting story with Mario, and they basically just made it like a theme park ride. It's like, oh, now we're at Peach's Castle. Now we're at the Haunted Mansion. Now we're at Bowser's Castle. Now we're on Rainbow Road. And there's no cohesion. There's no reason why anything is happening. And yeah, maybe it is for babies, but for all the praise this movie got and for all the money it got, it just comes down to a vapid product lacking anything redeemable creatively.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
People like to point out, like, I have a grudge against, like, Nintendo people, and that's part of it. But I mean, I wanted the Mario movie to be good. I wanted to come out of it with at least something saying, like, you know what, that was a good effort. But no, there's no reason to ever watch that movie again, and it's completely irrelevant in pop culture now because it had nothing valuable to bring to the table.
Yeah. See, I'm not as strongly opinionated on the Mario movie as you are, because I watched it, and I thought it was probably the most 5 out of 10 I've ever seen. It had an arc that was somewhat cohesive, but it didn't take a very big swing with it. It spent a lot of time on things that didn't really amount to much. But at the very least, the animation was pretty, and the arc with Mario was somewhat consistent. But other than that, there's not much else to it.
My whole theory is that this goes to the point where Mario movie made like $1.4 million or $1.4 billion. It's like the top 20 grossing movie in history, and it speaks to the greater point of how a lot of consumers, they don't really engage with stuff with much depth. So the Mario movie, of course they're going to like the Mario movie. They probably only have seen like less than 50 movies in their entire life. So the Mario movie is going to come off as a lot better. But and it's fine if you enjoy things on a simplistic level. I'm not trying to burst your bubble here or act all pompous, although as much as it may sound like it. But I think, like, people calling it a masterpiece is, like, utterly ridiculous.
Well, I think people throw around the word masterpiece too much anyways. And I didn't think it was nearly as good as everyone said it was. I thought it was, like I said, like, literally as close to a 5 as you could possibly get.
Yeah. My verdict is that it's junk. But it's easy for people to accept junk when they don't have a frame of reference for what is truly good filmmaking.
That's true.
And I'm not saying the Mario movie had to be like some freaking Martin Scorsese masterpiece.
Yeah.
Bare minimum amount of effort in actually like building story and character would have been greatly appreciated rather than just a glorified theme park ride.
Yeah.
It probably has something to do with wasted potential as well, because it's such a well-established IP that they could have done so much more with it, so it feels like more of a loss.
I mean, like, it's not like Mario is averse from like more complex storytelling. I mean, the story in Super Mario Galaxy is amazing.
Gosh, it's really good. I was playing through that earlier.
And it's like a more serious tone for Mario, but it's not out of place. It fits in, and it's just a new angle for that. But I don't know. I just, in my mind, I punish mediocrity so much harder than like poor execution on something that seems like they were actually trying. So
well, that's what
that's where a lot of people disagree with me when it comes to this take. But like, I just hate people who punt the football, and they just don't have any bother in like doing anything ambitious. And that's what the Mario movie is to me. They hit all the checklists of what they knew would make all the people soy out in the theater and point at the screen, and they had no other interest in like doing anything interesting with like the most celebrated video game character in history.
Yeah, you can tell that they made it with specifically Nintendo fans in mind, and they were like, it was made with the same sort of like pause for audience applause moments that like Marvel movies or modern Marvel movies have.
Modern Star Wars.
Also, yeah, like
I know Zesty prevents you from talking about Star Wars, but God, that is like that is what sent me on the downward spiral of like, oh my God, design in like all facets of media is going down the toilet, and people just don't care.
Yeah, no, it is. I think that there is I think you say this in your recent video about Jar Jar, but there is a point where like Force Awakens releases, and for some reason, some unperceivable reason, no one could possibly know why, the quality of cinema from that point onward declines drastically. Like, it takes a fucking nosedive from like the moment Force Awakens releases. Like, now granted, that's also kind of coincides with like Marvel getting more popular, and a lot of people attribute that to Hollywood sucking more. But I attribute it largely to the first Star Wars sequel releases, and it shatters records, best selling movie ever, and then all of a sudden everyone tries to emulate what it does. But
oh God, dude. Yeah, this is like another video I want to make on Downward Diary. It's like the funniest movie argument in history was when Martin Scorsese rightfully called out the Marvel movies as being not true cinema.
Yeah.
And like all the freaking Marvel fanboys were like, "Oh, well, what have you done, Martin Scorsese? Well, let's see the films you make." "Oh, wait, Taxi Driver, all-time great film. Raging Bull, all-time great film. Goodfellas, all-time great film. Wolf of Wall Street, The Departed. No, you don't know what you're talking about. You know what? All those films suck. You should just learn to make films more like Marvel."
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude.
Yeah.
The fact that there's even so many, it is like the stochastic cascading effect of brain rot on society from just consumer programming. How can so many people like think this? And obviously you're pissed off that the guy said like your epileptic seizure of superheroes hitting each other for 2.5 hours is like not true cinema. But like Martin Scorsese has the track record to say these things, and the fact that you're trying to like wrap around logic and try to call like Taxi Driver not a good film, you're living on a different planet.
I think,
and so many consumers now, they're on a different planet from reality.
I think that the only thing, because someone in chat brought up Mahler because I'm a massive Mahler fan, and Mahler took issue with Martin saying that for a different reason, which was that it's very hard to draw the line on what is and isn't cinema. And like this resulted in Martin having to like kind of walk it back, because like it's like when people say, "Oh, so and so, oh, that's not art." You know, Marvel movies, they can't be art, because people put a lot of stock into certain words, and I think when you start saying what is and isn't art, you get into a really mucky conversation that gets really pedantic and kind of you get kind of fool yourself with it. Although I think that his criticisms of the Marvel movies are accurate. It's just that I wouldn't say that they aren't cinema. I just say that they're bad. But
well, they aren't cinema. They are cynical. As in, I don't believe you can't convince me that there's any other vision in these films beyond making a shitload of money. And that to me is a delineating factor in what constitutes art. And maybe you can make the argument that there is some hidden artistic value, or maybe like the VFX or elements of the Marvel movies are worthy of praise as an artistic creative project, but considering how much they whip those VFX workers to the point where they're like constantly being sued for poor working conditions, I really doubt that the VFX teams for the Marvel movies had that much creative leeway in exercising any kind of vision.
I agree.
And that Bob Iger or anyone is super interested in the art of Disney's products. And to me, that's where I draw the line. Something is just, I mean, you're basically like freaking Ed, and Eddie making a scam for people.
Yeah.
And maybe in terms of being a scam artist, there's artistic value in that. But in terms of the product that is accessory to the scam, you have a hard time convincing me that there's any sort of actual artistic value in it.
Yeah, I understand. I think that it's just hard for me to like rule out. I have a very broad definition of art, and because I a lot of people define it in a lot of different ways, and it bothers me because it often leaves out a bunch of things that I think are widely considered art. So I think it's just more efficient to just say, oh no, that's just bad. That's bad art. We don't. So, but like, have you seen?
I question the motivation of making art. That's all. That's just my main point.
Oh no, and I completely agree with that. When was the last time you saw the first Iron Man? I'm curious.
I haven't actually watched the original Iron Man.
You should watch it at some point because it is the best MCU movie by a long mile, and it was the second one ever made. And you can tell that there was at least someone had something at some point.
Well, that wouldn't surprise me because that was before the fucking started happening.
Yeah, before 2014.
Was that before Disney purchased the rights to Marvel?
Yes.
At least in the production.
Yes.
Yeah. Same.
Yes.
I mean, same thing happened. Same thing happened to Pixar. All of a sudden, now we have this this super business-like strategy of releasing our IPs. God, it's so cynical, dude. Fucking Incredibles 3 coming out. I don't want to see what that's going to turn into.
All of those movies are going to be bad. Every single movie they have announced at D23, all the sequels are going to be bad.
The Incredibles 2 was pointless, and The Incredibles is one of my favorite movies of all time. And to see The Incredibles 2, it's not even bad, but just to see that it's like pointless and generic, that is such a saddening thought, and I can't imagine what freaking Incredibles 3 is going to be like. Oh my god. But people still convince themselves to get excited about it because a lot of people like new things and a lot of people like familiar old things without actually having an appreciation for what made them good in the first place. But this applies to TF2, it applies to movies. I just get so jaded now seeing the sludge. It's all sludge. I mean, like, all those Disney movies announced, the Mufasa movie. Does anybody want this? And it's going to make $1.5 billion when it comes out.
Yep.
Where's the money coming from? Who the hell knows? But then when I watch stuff in theaters like Mad Max Furiosa and Kevin Costner's new movie, Horizon, stuff with an actual vision and talent and effort put into it, and see it get slaughtered at the box office, it is so hard to not get blackpilled over like the state of modern culture. It is like, and then freaking Inside Out 2. Oh, it's Inside Out, but we added more emotions. $1 billion. And these are like the only movie. They're going to have to start converting movie theaters into daycares to stay relevant, because like only children and moms are watching and paying to go see movies now. While like stuff with an actual vision, I guess Dune did okay, so maybe that's one bright spot. But Furiosa and Horizon getting slaughtered. It's like, am I just specifically choosing to watch unprofitable movies now? Or has there been a major change in consumer behavior where people just don't care to challenge themselves with media that is actually like impressive or culturally impactful?
Well, you can see the same thing with the kind of the death of regular single player game releases from AAA developers. Like, basically every developer you can name has thrown all of their chips in, with the exception of kind of Nintendo, has thrown all of their chips into like the multiplayer. Like, we make a multiplayer game and we siphon money from that for the next 5 years and then we do it again. Like that's what every single company has done, and you'll get like an occasional like an Elden Ring or a Horizon Zero Dawn or something like that. I know that, or the whatever the sequel was called, I forget. But like regular single player game releases are so much less common from AAA developers. You kind of have to go to indie games now for that, and it's the same thing with movies because you just don't have like you don't have the same. You don't have original ideas. You have sequels and reboots. Just pile that shit on constantly, and it's
People
like
are
the same
sick
thing.
of it.
Yeah, and
People are. I mean, last year was like one of the most unprofitable years in Hollywood ever. Like 9 out of the 10 things Disney released were like multi-hundreds of $1 million losers. But they're still doing it. They're still going full steam ahead because every now and then you get the Inside Out 2 that makes up for the losses. $1 billion box office for some fucking reason. But we are in cinema particularly, at least in video games, there's good stuff like Deep Rock, and there's smart developers who know that gaming consumers, not all of them are so stupid and addicted where they're going to constantly tolerate just this nonsense. But cinema, dude, I don't know. It's like I have a feeling that we're not going to see like a true auteur blockbuster for a very long time. Like Oppenheimer was kind of the last one. And now everything has to be tied to a franchise. Everything has to be a sequel. Everything has to be some ugly, hideous reboot of creepy, uncanny Valley Lions that nobody likes, but the movie made $1.5 billion for some fucking reason. So we have to keep the ship full steam ahead.
Yeah.
More ugly, hideous, disgusting, uncanny Valley Lions. Oh, dude, it's getting ugly, and people have been like talking about the death of cinema for years, but I have a feeling that there's a reasonable possibility that in about 25 years, people are going to look at the act of going to the movies as how we look at like old people going to see like a laser show at the planetarium. It's just going to be like this old defunct antiquated media. It's like, what, you're paying $10 to see something on a slightly bigger screen? And it's like, yes, because it makes the product immersive and you can actually engage with it better than at your house where you have 17 roommates microwaving food and going to the bathroom and constantly coming in and out of the door. Yes, I prefer to engage with movies that way. Sorry if it's not exactly up to snuff with the modern Zoomer and Gen Alpha methods of consuming content on your phone every single day.
Yeah. And it's more common now that like that movies that are really, avant-garde or, try and do something original, they become popular and profitable after the fact. They don't become profitable when they're released in cinemas. Oppenheimer was like a fucking miracle because it just happened to be positioned hilariously next to Barbie, and that's like the only reason why it was even in the public consciousness at all. Like movies like Baby Driver or Scott Pilgrim or Everything Everywhere All at Once, like those movies didn't do nearly as well in the box office as they did retroactively on streaming services in the years following their release. And those are all great movies, but they don't make impact in the cinema because they're not attached to a major franchise.
How did Whiplash do in theaters actually?
Oh, I think that's a movie that kind of also is in this category, where it just kind of released and it was something that a lot of film people saw because it was nominated for Best Picture, but I think it became retroactively more liked.
There's definitely prestige movies, and they don't make nearly enough money, but
like The Prestige.
There was a time when they were at least profitable. Dude, the pit in my soul in seeing Furiosa basically be like a horrendous bomb. Like no one went to go see it. And maybe you can make it up on streaming, but I hate that argument where it's like, oh, we made up for it on streaming later. According to what? What metrics? Like box office numbers that you completely pulled out of your ass and that you can just make up and fudge any time to make investors look at your company and say, oh, they're not losing that much money. Don't fire us, please. No. Box office, hard box office numbers. These things are like down across the board. And it's getting to the point where it's like scary, as in like, if you're a movie studio, how the hell can you be convinced to invest in another Furiosa?
Yeah.
A movie with like so much heart and charm, and it looks so good, and it's just not going to exist. These movies will cease to exist within 5 years at this rate because no one's going to see them. And maybe they'll convince themselves, oh, we put it on streaming and it made money on streaming, which again, totally nebulous numbers that can be completely fudged and lied about. And then to just hide the fact that people aren't engaging with these products anymore. And it's like, it's getting bad. It's just my main thing. We need to like watch out, or at least savor good movies that still come out in theaters, because I have a feeling it's either gonna go on like a nuclear winter, where it's gonna be a generation without anything actually in theaters before a new wave of art comes along again. Some would say it's cyclical, like the whole new Hollywood movement of the 60s and 70s that produced many of the greatest films in history. That came after a big lag period, where the attendance in movies went down a ton. But I don't know, for some reason now it feels a little different. It feels like movies are on the brink of extinction, where there's going to be no reason. It's like, I could just pay for 1 month of HBO, and I don't have to go pay one movie ticket. And it's concerning that people... It's like people have lost sight of valuing the finer things in life, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to watch new movies on my TV. I'm sorry. It's just not... It's not a good experience. It's not better than going to the theater. And maybe you want to talk about, economic conditions. It's easier for people to save money and cut costs that way. But, like, if you intrinsically enjoy films and you intrinsically enjoy getting invested in movies and, like, really engaging with the products, it is depressing to think that probably in 5 years, most of the best movies will not even be put out in theaters. And you'll be forced to watch them on your TV.
I was going to ask you, do you think that part of the reason for this is that people going to see like more shot in the dark movies, those were like typically younger people, and most of those people now are watching things on YouTube that kind of fill the same new media itch without having to...
endless TikTok doom scrolling, just watching sludge. I combined 5 different flavors of slime. And it's like, dude, sorry. Do you realize that this kind of stuff is like for literal babies?
Well, I think
you should be graduating to more advanced forms of cultural media. And do you not have any sense of urgency or pride in doing that? It's not to like ridicule people's intelligence. You can be an unintelligent, simple person and still get good value out of classic films like The Godfather and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
I agree.
But it almost seems like there's this cultural anti-intellectual movement where it's somehow lame and reflects poorly on you to engage with classical media. Like, did anyone like catch that interview? It's like this clip that went viral where like some Hollywood interviewer was like talking to Austin Butler or something, and he said his favorite movie was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And like so many people in the comments were like, why do you have to be so pretentious and watching old movies? Why can't you just say that your favorite movie is Toy Story? It's like, dude, really? Like, after a while, you have to like get tired of seeing like children's movies and like very simple messages and morals, and you have to move on to something more complex. Like, am I wrong about this? But there's some people, they just, maybe it's a fear or a stigma of something, or like maybe engaging with something that they might not understand immediately and make them feel dumb. But it seems like such a new generation of people have been shying away from complex media, and it's bizarre to see. Like when I was at the theater for Horizon, which I don't know if any of you got a chance to watch that.
Not yet.
But it's not like the best movie, but it at least shows ambition and a creative spark that is like Kevin Costner like invested $30 million of his own money to make this thing like as his own vision and not have a studio tell him what to do. And the average age in that theater had to have been like 55. I felt like I was at an AARP meeting. There was like maybe 1 or 2 people in there that were under the age of 30. And I feel like this did not used to be the case. At least when I was a kid, there was constantly 20-somethings going to see the new movies.
Yeah.
Going to see stuff like 300 and No Country for Old Men. And where that audience has disappeared. And like those people back then, they're now in their 40s and 50s. And the current like my generation, the people in their 20s and 30s, they have like no motivation to go see interesting movies anymore in the theater. And I'd be interested to hear from other people if they see a similar experience. But where I am, it's like the theaters are empty.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
It's like anything that's not a kids movie.
Yeah. No. It's even. Alan, have you gone to the theater in Tokyo recently?
Not for like 2 years.
It's well. No, we went to Tokyo. Anyways, like when we went to Okinawa when we traveled there, the theater was empty, and I went to a movie in Tokyo recently, and the theater was close to empty, and I feel like it's just become more, I don't know, convenient. It's becoming Wall-E basically, where people just would rather just sit in their own chair and watch things at their house, and things on YouTube that or things on doom scrolling on TikTok or things on Netflix. And it's the older generation that really like cares enough to want to it seems old fashioned, I think, to go to the movie theater a lot of the time.
And also a lot of movies probably aren't worth seeing in the theater either,
Well, yeah, that's the other thing, is I think
That's
a lot
true.
of people have lost a lot of faith in the cinema, like conceptually.
I mean, I like seeing new movies in theaters that I find interesting, but there's times where like months go by, and I'm like, I look at what's playing in my local theater, and I'm like, really, this is what they're coming out with? Like, there's like not one interesting movie. There's like one theater near me that like puts out freaking Bollywood movies, and I tried watching a few of them. I was like, maybe it'll be interesting. They're awful. They were all awful, and India is like in the '80s era of filmmaking where everything's cheesy.
Yeah.
And they haven't progressed to like advanced and complex themes yet. But I don't know. It's like there's like always at least 2 kids movies playing now. There's always something from Disney, some hero, Star Wars slop or whatever. And there's like usually like 2 random horror movies that they come out and you forget about them. Like the Blumhouse style of just pumping out low budget horror movies. Those are usually there. And then maybe if you're lucky, in 1 month, there'll be like one interesting original screenplay in the actual theater. And yeah, it makes it hard. It makes it less habitual to go to the movies. That's for sure. So maybe that's part of the thing where people stop thinking about going to the movies for anything. They just revert to just simply watching stuff at home on TV or on their phone.
I think the silver lining to it, though, is that I don't think this has really happened with music, or at least not to the same extent. I think that music is still something where streaming has made it so convenient to look for new things that people are regularly finding new artists that they enjoy or new artists that make good music, and those artists are getting their due because of just how it's like one of the few instances where the streaming environment has actually made good art easier to find rather than making corporations sort of monopolize everything. And I think that's like the only silver lining with all this whole corporatization trend.
And that's because you can consume music in a very short amount of time.
True.
And you can listen to it while multitasking on other things, whereas a movie is an hour and a half, and realistically now in the modern way things are going, 2.5 hours of just sitting by yourself with your own thoughts. And I think honestly a lot of people struggle with that now. There's the meme about the Zoomer attention span, Gen Alpha attention span, but it does seem to have had a profound effect on at least part of the population where it seems like people just can't freaking sit still without stimming or constantly having some stupid Temple Run or like Subway Surfer shit playing on the side.
Yeah, I saw a clip of a school assembly, and the teacher had Subway Surfers pulled up on a projector screen while he was talking.
Pretty funny.
I don't know if it was real, but it looked like it looked dystopian. It was kind of freaky.
Well, maybe that's the way of the future.
That's the way of the future.
Anyway, TF2. Is there anything else want to get to with the video here?
Yeah, that was a good tangent. I guess I'll ask you, one more question, which is, like, what do you see in the future of the game reasonably? Like, what do you think
Well,
it's going?
people haven't been shied away now. I'm guessing this game is just always going to have people, at least for like decades and decades more.
Mm.
It sounds strange to say, but it's going to be like one of those things where if so many TF2 players have not stopped at this point,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still new people coming in, I mean, this game still has a lot of life in front of it, and while the period of Valve actually updating the game with balance changes and whatever, that's long gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's nice to have at least this relic, because TF2 is still a relic from the past of a time in multiplayer gaming where you could just chill on a server with a bunch of strangers
Mm-hmm.
and talk to some of them and even maybe make friends in a non-try-hard, non-MMR bullshit environment where everyone is sweating their ass off and being toxic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people used to make friends in game lobbies. I don't know if that even happens anymore.
I don't think it's happened to me in a game that isn't TF2 or Deep Rock Galactic in a very long time.
Yeah, it's unfortunate,
Mm.
but it's it's still good to have that resource, and that is why with stuff like Fixed TF2, it's important to preserve the game
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure that, dude, it's still an option. There's no other games like TF2 anymore that you can play. Like maybe some of them. I'm like, I don't know if like people still play Unreal Tournament and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
on like private modded servers or whatever.
Yeah.
But in terms of a game at scale where there's like a pretty significant big player base and it's not just the same people every time, TF2 is kind of the only part of that era of gamers and shooting that still has those elements where you could just have like this massive battle arena of a bunch of people just blowing each other up with weapons and having a good time and relaxing almost.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good note to end off on. Imp, I appreciate you coming on. It really means a lot that you decided to pop in on this show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the invite, and hopefully the folks at home found it to be an entertaining discussion.
Mm. Yeah, no,
I'm sure they did.
Yeah, no, I think not to suck your dick too hard, but I think you have a very specific way of talking that isn't really I don't think it really I don't think the way in which you structure ideas is different from the average person. So I think it's valuable to have you on here, even in comparison to a lot of the other guests we've had.
Well, I appreciate the compliment, and hopefully you guys can keep having a good show, good discussion going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You are of course no pressure. You are always welcome to come back in the future. Before we end off, I will make one final announcement regarding the upon further survival, which I'm really excited about. And I don't know if you know about this, but we're starting a UFR Minecraft SMP that will hopefully not go down the road of many other SMPs. But yeah, that's starting on the 16th. I announced the creator list on stream recently, and it's going to feature Zesty, it's going to feature Richter, it's going to feature a bunch of people all playing a beta Minecraft version, which is going to be absolutely awesome. Very much looking forward to it. So, stay tuned. Yeah, stay tuned for that. It's going to be great. Anyways, I think that wraps things up. I appreciate you being here, Imp, and to everyone else, bye-bye.